Hello and welcome to Varn Blog and the Regrettable Century. And today I am here with the brothers Regrettable, or as I like to call them on public airstreams, Chris and Jason, last name withheld chick. So
that works.
Listen to it. I went back and listened to like an early version, early form of this, and you referred to us as the outreach department of the Regrettable Century.
Yeah.
Yeah, that tracks. That's good.
Yeah.
I like that.
That's also true. So we are talking about decadence today. We were in the middle of Aufheben's kind of infamous late 90s, early aughts essay, which was specifically aimed at the international communist current theory of decadence, which is a theory of decadence that is primarily about various forms of the rate of profits to fall. Now,
Right.
I can't figure out if the authors today would even agree with their conclusions to that essay, because I think at least one of the people involved with Aufheben Collective would now say that there is a rate of profits. There is a tendency of the rate of profits to fall. We were confusing a bunch of technical stuff. Two, I think it's also weird when we're talking about decadence in the broad sense. We mentioned two other essays. One was Samir Amin's. We spent 2 episodes, and the other was 2 different kind of classical views on what decadence is that were helpful. Decadence is a metaphor to organic living systems, and decadence implies more than collapse. There's a reason why I like decadence better than collapse, that things do grow out of these problems. But the 2 things I don't like about collapse is it's a ventil and makes it sound like there's 1 or 2 things you can pinpoint, and that'll tell you when you've entered the moment, of the crises or whatever. And 2, it implies an end, whereas decadence implies an end and a reformation and something new.
Right. I like pairing decay with decadence, saying decadence and decay, because decay doesn't necessarily indicate that anything is happening anytime soon, and from decay grows all sorts of new things.
Yeah.
Well, it's like telling right now. For example, I'll give you an example of this. I think, like, talking about decadence, I don't think we've had a discussion about decadence but once since the Trump election, and God forbid we've seen at both the Democratic Party's decadence in hindsight and whatever the hell's going on now.
And just the Imperial the Imperial ventures that we've been involved in Trump 2 are a really good illustration to me of the decadence of the Imperial armed forces.
Oh, that we're literally using like more warships to just bomb fishing boats that may or may not be doing some illicit activity that would definitely not count as terrorism under even U.S. law, much less international law.
Right.
And that capacity is like 20% of the naval forces or something. And like, it's literally 3 times what we did a war in Grenada with. Just
right?
people that knows, huh?
I said, is that right?
Really? Wow. Yeah, I looked it up. I
mean, it's not surprising, but it kind of is.
Well, I mean, at the same time, if we look at what's happening with the Imperial project, like, you have the gutting of the leadership of the armed forces, which I didn't think would be allowed to happen.
Right.
Like this is another proof of prior decadence to me, is like, in most other societies, with the kind of thing that Hex F is doing would lead to a civil war almost within a few months.
Yeah.
But the core of the military no longer has the ability to act out of turn with its own bureaucratic initiative. Like, there's no way for a non-bureaucratic emergent power to like countervail these forces from within the military itself. or if there is a way, we haven't seen it yet. I mean, I shouldn't say there's no way. I shouldn't be predicting that, but like, and you would think that given our past experience with how militaries work, that it would have at least led to an officer's plot, if
right?
And we don't have any evidence of that. But then you even look at like another way we can think about this is about people talk about blowback, but this isn't blowback. Like blowback is just like people confuse blowback with Empire Coming Home, but what we see here is like the peripheralization that you guys and I have hinted at about parts of the United States being applied to the whole thing. And so we are like the core of capital is peripherizing itself in the deepest parts of capital. So it is not just like in the hinterland anymore. It's now in California and New York.
Right.
And Chicago. Like, those are all interesting things. That's very much a decadent society. But I want to bring this up because I think a lot of this is going to be, but that's the U.S. That's the U.S. empire failing. And I'm like, yeah, that's true. But that's not the only thing that we're seeing going decadent right now.
Yeah, I think that anybody who says it's just the U.S. empire or it's just the U.S. whatever culturally, or it's just the West even, it's like there's some fundamental misunderstanding or intentional blindness when it comes to the totality, when it comes to the global social and political order. It's all decadent.
In as much as it still exists as any kind of order.
Well, yeah. I mean, that's the reason why there is
an
emergent BRICS attempt. That's the reason why there is at least some quasi-philosophical discourse around multipolarity. There's partial recognitions that this.
Yeah, I'm going to push back on you a little bit, though, because multipolarity, I think, has been a thing since the end of the Bush administration, if we're completely honest. The best Bush, too.
Yeah.
But B, emergent, like, what we see now is imperial multipolarity.
Yeah.
What you're moving away from, like, the stupid shit Trump's doing is actually in line with what the multipolaristas don't realize that they were advocating for, because us bossing around Latin America is what a multipolar world would indicate: a declining empire turning back to its zone of influence, and justifying that is what that looks like.
Yeah.
Our sphere of influence has always been the Western Hemisphere, with the exception of Venezuela and Cuba, and I guess that's flexing.
It's also the case that
we can't flex in China and in the in the Western Pacific, and we can't flex in the or the Eastern Pacific. Sorry, wait, when does it flip over to
the Western Pacific?
Yeah,
it's also the case that
the Indian Ocean. I don't know.
Yeah,
like the Sao Paulo Forum and the Mercosur, and there's the whole pink tide was premised, in part at least, on a different conception of multipolarity.
Right.
So it's kind of like what there is to say about like the role of Napoleon Bonaparte. It's like there's the promise of the bourgeois revolution, and then there's what happens with the bourgeois revolution.
Right.
And so I think that both things can be true at the same time. Like multipolarity it has meant this, but it doesn't necessarily mean this.
I think the peripheralization of the core, like what I meant with the military, is the only reason why we're not seeing proxy wars all over Latin America.
Yeah.
And we are like, yet, right.
Yeah.
If someone gets their shit together, we are going to. Also, I think Trump is a weirdly contradictory figure on war and always has been, but people have missed this because it's like seems so against the prior form of imperial mode. He really doesn't like he likes using force. He doesn't have any problem with killing people. That's not the point, but he really doesn't like risking the state's resources in a war because it means he can't loot it. And he really does seem to be averse to to a bunch of young Americans dying, which makes sense when you think about our population rates if you also don't want to have immigration.
Yeah.
Which means that he's going to like to threaten wars because, I mean, for domestic things, for international influence, it's a very mobbed up thing to do, if nothing else. But
to keep
he's
people from
terrified
talking about his pedophilia accusations, stuff like that.
Yeah, but it's going to be very hard for him to deliver on them and also complete his domestic project at all. Like, you can't deploy the National Guard all over the United States. He can barely do that now. He definitely can't do it if you're actually in a war.
Right.
Like,
I mean, and on top of that, I think that he has, based on his actions in the Red Sea against the Ansar Allah in Yemen, he has this mistaken notion that a lot of people who don't understand the military have, that you can win wars with airstrikes, right?
Yeah, you can't.
Yeah, you can't. No, it takes boots on the ground. Infantry wins wars. Airstrikes are like, a softening up measure, and that's pretty much it. But yeah, so I think that he thinks that he could just airstrike his way into getting what he wants. That's probably what he's going to try to do in Venezuela. I mean, that's what they tried to do in Iran. They tried to airstrike their way into regime change, which didn't happen, and that's probably what they're going to try to do in Venezuela. Yeah, I don't know, and maybe I know they have a contingent of Marines on hand, and that's probably like for once there is a regime change, like the forces that they're counting on in Venezuela have risen up and overthrown the government, that they could like help them out by sending in Marines to back them up. But I don't think that he is planning on doing a full-scale war against Venezuela.
Well,
it's funny because that's definitely what's going to have to be the case, but he's definitely he doesn't want that to be the case. And
yeah, it's not going to happen, I don't think. I mean, I think they'll do airstrikes, and I don't think that's going to cause regime change, because as unpopular as Maduro is compared to Chavez anyway, he's still not less he's still not less popular than Trump and the United States is in Venezuela.
I mean, that's one of the reasons. One of the effects of Chavismo is that Maduro is such a disappointment. But the Yankees are the worst thing that can happen to us. So, like,
yeah, and they're right about that. To be fair,
yeah.
So
yeah, it's very true. So, like, honestly, the worst thing that Donald Trump and Marco Rubio and the Gusano community can do for their own purposes, for their own cause, is precisely what they're doing right now, which is turning all of Latin America against them again.
So to make this an illustrative point about decadence and not just about Trump, though, because
right.
With the military, there's a couple of things we can notice, right? We talked about Trump's military incentives are all over the place, but if you want to do the kinds of even local imperialism that he wants to do, very Monroe Doctrine, isolationist, 19th century American imperialism, you cannot be doing what you're doing to the military's brass and also what you're doing domestically and also mistaking counterinsurgency tactics are pre-war tactics, and this is a conflation of both. This is not unique to Trump. This is actually endemic in the military itself. With fighting a traditional war, when people go, "Oh, well, we're not in Clausewitzian times," like when you're fighting occupied forces that have a place to go, like the occupiers have a place to go, like in Iraq, right?
Right.
Third generation warfare means you can take. Fourth generation warfare means you can take the occupied forces can take 4 times the losses of an occupying force and be viable. But one of the ways you break them up is airstrikes. But you know what you can't do with that? You can't actually reconstitute anything.
Right.
So you just have you have basically a vacuum for chaos, which if anyone wants to like actually read counterinsurgency theory and then look at what happened in Iraq, it's totally predictable. Right.
Or just like at best, at most, you could hope for Korean War outcome.
Right.
Like, which in the north that we leveled it. The U.S. Air Force dropped so much ordnance that there was nothing left to bomb. Didn't win the war. Just didn't do anything. They just built everything underground.
As I tell people, you can annihilate the population with enough of a bomb. I mean, even now, but then what's the point of a war at that point? There's no resources. Right.
And even annihilating a population with bombs, unless you're using nuclear weapons, it's going to take a really long time and a lot of ordnance. Because look at what Israel's been doing to Gaza, and there are still a shitload of people in Gaza. Yeah.
Well, there's a bunch of other problems there. Gaza's also like tiny, and if you would blow it up with nuclear weapons, which if the Israelis could, they would. It would also destroy like half of Israel.
Yeah.
You can't go back and settle on irradiated landscape like that.
Right.
Well, with hydrogen bombs, there's not the half-life is a lot shorter, I think.
Yeah. It's still not. You can't just go back tomorrow, though.
No.
My point, though, about all this is just like, why has this happened? Well, somebody was like, aren't you afraid of all these ex-military people on the right? And I'm like, I hate to tell you this, but unless you are dealing with Vietnam vets who would now be in their 60s and 70s, I am not dealing with people who are traditionally militarily battle hardened. So no.
Yeah, no.
I'm not afraid in the same way if you're talking about a civil war. Like it's just like nobody in America is that kind of battle hardened. Like,
no,
hate to tell you.
And the veterans aren't wholesale for Trump. A lot of them think that Trump is a traitor. A lot of them side with the Democrats because the Democrats are better managers of empire. I mean, Trump's waffling on Ukraine has really turned a lot of veterans and the military against him.
Trump's waffling on Ukraine has basically turned all sides against him.
Yeah.
Like, Russia don't trust him anymore. The allies don't trust him anymore. Like nobody. Like, go ahead.
Yeah.
But this is classic decadence stuff, though, right? Because let's talk about what it's trying to do. All right, it's not just the military stuff. I mean, like, I've been predicting, and anyone who's been paying attention has been predicting since the Bush administration that the empire is going to Hadrian's Wall itself. I mean, Fareed fucking Zakaria wrote about this in 2007. This is not like new. It's not even unique to Alexander Dugin or any of those people. That's been obvious for a long time if you've been paying attention. I've been following BRICS as a quasi thing for like almost 20 years.
Yeah. It's had some rapid development since Trump came to office, though.
Absolutely.
In a way that it never would have if he didn't try to strong arm India, strong arm China, strong arm Russia, and it's such a ham-fisted and stupid way.
He's done something that I have never thought was possible, which was get the Japanese and the Indians to work with post-communist PRC.
Right.
Even at all. Like, yes, they were all in BRICS, but they were undermining each other in BRICS.
If he keeps pushing, though, he might even end up making Pakistan and India bros again.
Which is really that would be quite the feat.
Bringing people together, man.
To local consolidations of power everywhere on the planet, but North America.
Yeah, except for like bring the North and South in Korea back together. Bring Pakistan, India back together. Bring everybody back together.
Speaking about management of empires, this is another good one. We managed to make liberal Canadian nationalism cool in Canada again, despite the fact it's feckless, weak, and has no real answer to Trump policies.
Yeah.
Like, so, people are like, oh, Mark Carney's such a I'm like, dude, Canada needs Iron Ship America. And I don't mean Iron Ship United States, I mean North America.
Right.
To be cooperative for its economy to make a lot of sense. And Trump has disrupted that. And everyone's going to pay a price for it, including a lot of the people in the United States. I'm not, this is not without, I mean, you want to talk about self-owns lately, but in a way, this is like Brexit on a bigger scale. What Brexit showed you is if you couldn't use the British economy outside of empire have been running on vapors. Sorry, Corbynistas, because that your policies were never possible either. And that it had been able to play a shell game with labor cost and investment to hide the fact that it wasn't a productive economy in a way that the United States actually is still kind of a productive economy. Like, as bad as things are here, we're still actually a major producer of real materials. Britain is not.
We still make lots of stuff.
Right. Britain is not. There is... And Britain is now, I think I was seeing that like the GDP is going to be surpassed by fucking Ireland soon. Like,
wow.
Like, it's just, but what that was is basically there was a shell game and the British realized that they were getting screwed. But by removing the international context for playing the shell game and showing the profitability crisis and the manufacturing crisis and all that, they actually made their problems a lot more acute, which is not to say they shouldn't have done it. They were going to get screwed either way. I mean, the British public, but I mean, I'm not here to like say, oh, everything would be fine if Brexit hadn't happened.
No, I mean, very clear. I don't think so. I very clearly don't think so. When it comes to like the EU, staying in the EU is not the solution.
Right. But ripping off a Band-Aid over the fact you've been eviscerated makes the little bits of your guts that are still there fall out faster.
Yeah, I mean, I really do think that the solution to the crisis that culminated in Brexit, it's still ongoing, to the Brexit problem is the same as the solution to the Greek European banking crisis. And it's the same as the solution to Cuba's crisis after overthrowing Batista. Mm-hmm. You have to go all the way. That's it. So, like, Brexit would have been good in the same way that Grexit should have been good if everybody was willing to, how should I say this? Be a socialist.
I actually completely disagree. Oh, if they're socialist, yes. But the thing is, they also need the raw imports on this. Like, the geography of where you're at still matters. And Grexit and Brexit are both a problem because, like, the reason why the British are so imperialist is their island kind of sucks.
Well, yeah, they don't really have anything there. Like, you got a bunch of people.
Right, yeah, and like
you have to Cubify yourself, and that also does mean
being isolated from the world economy.
Being isolated from the world economy, suffering a lot, and also making trade deals with less than revolutionary states like Russia.
Right.
And if you look at like what's happened since Brexit, I mean, I guess Keir Starmer has been trying as hard as he possibly can to reintegrate the UK into the European into the European sphere. Like, I think that's his whole plan, and that's why he's doubled down on Ukraine so hard. That's why that's why Europe has doubled down on Ukraine so hard, is because they need that as like a coagulant to keep them together. They need the big, scary, bad Russia to keep their project together, and why they're like shifting towards a military footing, trying to become like a military alliance, not just a trade, or I guess a trade sphere, right? Mm-hmm. And because that doesn't offer anything to people anymore. Being part of the European Union is not necessarily going to make anything any better for your country.
Not anymore.
Nope.
I mean, so if we, when we take this apart, we can start seeing some international trends. One, and then we can like deduce some rules for decadence, and we can talk about both external to states and external to states, and maybe this will make this a little bit clearer. So what we see now is blue water trade is declining in general. There's no real set, like, the other thing that happened that counteracts some of this stuff with, The inability of the Belt and Road to pop off the way it was supposed to pop off, partly because of the tensions between Russia and Ukraine, partly because of some other things in Central Asia. Actually, it wasn't really the United States that caused that to fail. Meant that BRICS becomes a more important road for building an alternative capitalist modernity.
Right.
And the Chinese communists, people will get mad at me, but the Chinese communists think that they need to develop capitalist modernity over to the West because I think they think they're nowhere near, like, the Chinese experience with its specific collectivization period and all that is not replicable anywhere else on Earth now. You just can't do it again. It's, if for no other reason, there's not enough peasants in most of the fucking planet for that to work.
Okay, so all right.
But it's also like Deng's reforms worked because the collected period happened. The collected period happened because of the Sino-Soviet tension, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Yeah. Those aren't repeatable. You can't just be, you can't like repeat the 60s, 70s, 80s, or 90s Maoist experience. Like, it's not
in the same way you can't repeat the 20s and 30s Soviet experience. You can't repeat the 19th century British experience. You can't repeat what's already happened. Doesn't matter what you're really talking about, because it's happened and it's developed and it's changed things, and the things that are now happening are downstream of that.
So people who think I hate China are wrong, but just to break this up. But my point is, like, they think you need an alternate capitalist modernity that may be something like a communist international, in so much that they're even interested in it, which I'm not. Which I do believe there are factions in the PRC that are. I mean,
certainly are. Yes,
but they're not dominant. There's also a Han nationalist faction that's not insignificant, and some confused neo-Maoists who play both sides of this. Plus, also, we have to admit that most of us in the West don't really have a good grasp on regional politics in China at all. Like, even those of us who follow China, I think you have to both read Mandarin and also physically be there to get a real good feel.
I think that if you're going to be a watcher and a commentator on another country,
you should probably read their language, or at least read people who do read their language.
Yes, and I also think that you have to have some connection to, and some long-term connection to, the less tangible complexities and fluctuations in their cultural life, and you have to have some understanding of the rhythms of life overall. Like, I'm very fascinated by a couple of things that happen in the world. Mm-hmm. I wouldn't say that I know enough about, I don't know what it's like to be Russian. I don't know what it's like to be Slovak. I know some things that are happening. I think maybe that's it.
Yeah. Well,
Jason, noted standpoint epistemologist. No, I'm kidding. I'm joking. Go
ahead. No, I mean that. I see where you're coming from, Jason, but I mean, I don't think that should ever stop us from trying to understand it and commenting on things. And if that was the case, then we would have to just only talk about what's going on in the United States at all times,
or maybe even what's going on in Texas.
Yeah. Well, I'll tell you one thing: is I get really tired of listening to other people try to talk about what's going on in Texas.
Yeah. Yeah. What I was saying before we started recording was, I think this is true in every kind of discussion. Mm-hmm. If you let's say you live in El Paso, you can't really quite tell, where does Mexico start, where does the United States start. Culturally, it's very, very similar. Linguistically, even, it's very similar. And you could make the case, and you would not be incorrect in saying borders shouldn't exist because nations don't exist, because we're all just people, man. And there's some truth to that. But then if you live in Maine and you take a trip to the Yucatan, you could see very clearly what Mexico is versus what the United States is, and what a tortilla tastes like compared to a bagel, and etc. Right? Like,
yeah.
If you zoom out far enough, you can see, and if you zoom in really close, you can't. And they're both right.
I was actually fascinated with this because I almost gotten a mild spat on BungaCast when I was visiting them recently. When they said the United States is really homogenous, and I was like, "No, you're just an outsider."
Right.
Yep.
Like we are culturally really, really distinct, and if we actually like what erases it is our media culture and our economic culture does erase culture, but like I can tell you as a person who's lived in the upper Midwest, I grew up in the deep South, not the Texas South, which you guys aren't part of the deep South. Sorry, kicked you out.
Yeah, I've always said this.
Yeah, no, Texas is its own liminal space.
It is. Part of Texas is deep South, part of Texas is Southwest, part of Texas is North Mexico, and part of Texas is the lower Midwest.
Yeah.
Which was why I break it up into 5 states. But one of the things that I think about this a lot, seriously, is I live in Utah now, which is also a place that people talk about completely cluelessly. And not nearly as
I
important.
actually really like Utah. I
do too.
Always enjoyed the time that I've spent there.
And it's funny because people are like, "Oh, you don't know New York," and I'm like, "Yes, I do. I realize that like there's massive poverty in the Bronx, but you have social goods that massive poverty in say Mississippi doesn't meet."
Right.
My point in all this,
the poorest region in the entire country is the Mississippi Delta still, right?
Yeah. My point in all this is actually to make a few points about decadence and what we can know. But to go back to what you were saying, Jason, we talked about this in terms of like capitalism too. Like, we've done both ends of the capitalism debate. I did on the Patreon version of my show, I've done the Brenner books or the Brenner debate book, and then several articles with responding to it. And I came to the conclusion that the liberals are right about a few things, but they take the wrong, and they take their conclusion becomes there is no meaning to historiography because it's effectively imposed and arbitrary. And then I go like, but how do you explain that after the 19th century you had productivity rates like triple, right? Like, so there's no difference, huh? And then I look at it, I'm like, well, it emerged over 400 years. And if you read Marx, that's clear. Actually, Marx isn't deluded about it. Like the bourgeois revolutions are the instantiation of how late that mode of production is in a given nation state as being able to come to power and be a mode of production with a seemingly separate political project. But the mode of production could have been developing within something else for 300-400 years, which also is kind of one of the harrowing things for socialism and trying to deal with what the demarcation between socialism and capitalism will be similarly difficult, I think. Although Marx's gambit is that we would do things early enough, and this is related to this, that we would be able to be self-control enough to control what comes out of capitalism, unlike the birth of capitalism itself for most prior forms. Now, this brings us back to the Samir Amin theory of decadence, which we ended up kind of chucking because it has this tributary mode of production thing, which I do think has some basic truth to it. Like, you do have to, like, feudalism does seem weird when all the other empires are like way richer and more successful. Like Europe is the world's backwater in the 12th and 13th century. But and I agree with that, but my problem with Samir Amin is that it made it seem like that's like the default mode, and like capitalist decadence is just going to bring us back to a tributary mode of production, being very big about what that means. And I'm like, yeah, but we're not serfs. And this is my same problem with neo-feudalism. There's no, clicking tokens on the internet does not actually produce that much value, even in terms of revenue, and much less in terms of commodity production value. And there's no way that it produces a lot of use value so that people can eat or even build their fucking server farms. Right. So you are just looking at the very superficialist end of the way the economy works. Now, our overlords might be doing that too, which is a problem. But it's a misunderstanding of like every step of this chain. Yeah. And
That's our overlords have that problem all the time, though.
Right. So this leads me to why would that make a lot of sense, though, given what our overlords are doing seems to look like it. And I think there's like 4 things, 2 of which are Marxist and 3 of which I take from other things. And then these are mostly national, and we can talk about the international repercussions of it to like give this some shape. 1, there is a decline in rates of profits, Virginia, like in real commodities in Pacific. And the reason why it's hard to figure out is there's so much revenue tied in with rents that get mixed in with real commodities that make profit margins look larger than they are. But profit rates, if you actually look at the productivity of anything and why things are so low investment right now, people go, they're not low investment. Everything's in the stock market. No, you're not investing in anything but maybe a few server farms for people to farm out NVIDIA chips to. You're not actually building new jobs, new production, or anything like that. It's a low investment environment with high financial assets to look like investments. And bourgeois economics can recognize a difference.
Yeah, you could call it decadent.
Mm-hmm. I mean, even in the way it's decadent, and like if you read financial reporting and the Wall Street Journal 20 years ago, they understood the difference between revenues, profit rates, profit margins, and wealth transfers. If you read even the economics section of the Wall Street Journal today, they don't. They don't make that clear, which means the capitalists don't really understand the difference either. So it's not just the general public. It's not just the dumbass left. It is also the overlords.
It's everybody. Nobody knows. Nobody knows things.
Right. We're breaking all of our information systems because we can't control them. That's a highly decadent move, but it's a common one. Like, you don't like the reporting, you don't like chlamydia. Let's just not test people and hope that the chlamydia goes away.
Right.
I
guess the newest jobs report that they just refused to ever release. Like,
they're saying they're not going to release a jobs report during this administration now, ever.
Yeah.
That's going to go very well. Very well.
How bad does it have to be for that to happen?
It's worse than I think that we know. I want to say something for the whoever's listening, just to be very, very clear. I thought about this a little bit. I'm not at all in favor of cultural relativism. I'm very universalist in my thinking. I'm Catholic. I'm a communist. I just like Hegel. I want to tarry with the contradictions. I recognize that it's everything and it's also nothing. That's all.
Okay,
so don't like
to help you
write us an email and say
being a thing. Qualia and structure actually do explain this, and this is in the internal contradiction as stated in Hegel between the universal and particular. Which is why there's both a universal church, but there's still different languages. If you're a Christian, I mean, I'm not a Christian, but I can explain Christian logic to people much better than your average Protestant huckster. And
that's not really saying much, though.
No, it really isn't. And I'm not saying all Protestants are hucksters either, but like Ray Comfort
Protestants are.
Yeah, like not all Anglicans are, but like I do think that all Assemblies of God preachers are.
Yes.
Okay, you guys can go out there. I got no stake in this fight. But
I'm sorry to our Assemblies of God listeners.
The universal and particular problem actually is a problem because and it's a universal problem. I mean, it's why Marxists don't have a good answer to the workers of the world, no nation, but we also believe in national liberation, and we kind of always have, and it's never completely been able to square.
Right. I think that we don't have there's no good answer for that question because I think that question shouldn't be asked.
Right. Well, and so when we talk about things like the qualia of being Serbian, like I got no fucking idea. I do think there's a basic humanness that we could probably figure out.
Yeah.
But again, in a decadent collapse of terms and conflation, both an expansion and contraction of meaning, though, this makes a lot of this make sense in theory. I see a lot of theory as decadent, right? So people like are standpoint epistemologists. Now, where does standpoint epistemology come from? I can give you a long lineage. Basically, it's a bunch of Marxist feminists who read Lukács and applied it to the female experience, and they dropped the Marxist part, and it got vaguer and vaguer and vaguer.
I actually listened to a podcast that you did on that.
Yeah,
like a long time ago. I guess at this point, like 8 years ago.
Right, and then I actually discovered recently this happened with intersectionality too. The intersectionality had a very limited meaning about dealing with things in a legal context where you're looking at where two different forms of oppression come together and it creates a new form of oppression that's not legally recognized. And somehow it became like code word for solidarity, but also makes solidarity impossible, which is not implied by original theory at all. And what you see is a category expansion. And the reason why you see a category expansion is a decadent expansion of claims of authority in an academic field, and then a category collapse. So we now say, okay, so and to bring it back to standpoint epistemology, we now say the standpoint of the working class gives us some unique visions into the way working classness is experienced. This is important to Lukács. He gets kind of mystical with it, in my opinion, but I get where he's coming from. The standpoint of other peoples are also that way. Qualia is always going to be standpoint based. So you only can know what it is like to be a worker by being a worker, and you can only know what it's like to be a revolutionary worker by being a worker participating in a revolution. However, that is not even for Lukács the same as structural or gestalt or universal knowledge. It just isn't.
Right.
Like, and I'm not going to get into the Mott and Bailey thing, but basically people expand these categories. I'll give you another example. You can talk about the history of discussing racism. Like by about 2009, racism had been broken down from its like 90s pop counterpoint answer to classical legal racism, which is active bigotry or active legal discrimination against a particular group according to their racial status. All right.
Yeah.
It got expanded in the 90s, and people might remember this, to power plus privilege equals racism, which is funny because there's not even race anywhere in that definition. Right. But it's a way to say that like black people can't be racist. All right. Then that's obviously a non-starter for anyone who's trying to think through anything technically. So you see a response to that's actually a refinement of the categories. And so you see racism get broken down into systemic racism, which tends to be economic. So like being foreclosed out of economic markets, not having accumulated wealth, household provisions, higher cost of debt, which can even be fed back into like actuarial tables and legal things, which leads to a perpetuating group that people don't even have to be bigoted to maintain. Implicit bias, which is like associations I have with other cultures. And yeah, we always focus on race, but like, I don't know. I don't trust people from England. Like
I'm racist against people from England.
Right.
Exactly. Anglophones in general.
Yeah, Anglophones and Protestants just like, no. And I know this is an implicit bias. I am not structurally racist against people from England. I might not even be that,
good though.
I might not even be bigoted against people from England. I am, but I could not be.
I might not be. I am, but I might not.
Right. But I could not be. So there's implicit bias there, right? Like, and then there's explicit bigotry. But that people start using those terms interchangeably. So then you have CRT advocates in their late decadent phase go, well, let's just call everything racism because it's clearer.
Right. Yeah.
Like
everyone is racist. They're not even they related. Always have been racist, and there's nothing you can do about it. So you just need to feel bad all the time, right. And talk about how bad you feel as much as possible.
And also, everything you do has to be explicitly about race. If you fix things that are racial, but it isn't about race, it's still a racist policy because reasons.
Well, Chris, you can't talk about it too much because you're taking up too much space. And you.
Oh, that's true.
Also,
you guys
get out
of the way and let others
in
lead.
Oregon are considered people of color because Slavs are in Oregon for some reason. But
that's
anyway,
true. That's true. A point that we've made on the podcast many times. So please, when you speak to me, you're speaking to. Never mind.
But only in Oregon.
Only in Oregon. Yeah.
But and maybe in Britain. So the point I am making is that these categories get confused. This is not just in the United States, by the way. British and European people will occasionally use American frameworks for race and apply it to their frameworks of race. I mean, in the case of Britain, sometimes directly in ways that make absolutely no sense.
Yeah. Right. This is one of those places. This is an example of where I would insist upon the particular, because the American experience is not universal. It's nobody else has it. It's just an American experience.
Yes. Try to convince people and people that the Ukrainians are, as a general rule, incredibly fucking racist. And it's like, yeah, but they have a Jew as a president. It's like, oh, yeah, but that doesn't really mean anything. Not the way that we, because we're not there. They don't conceive of race the way that we're conceiving of race in the United States.
Right. Also, like the British Empire had a Jew as a prime minister, even though he was an Anglican convert. That doesn't actually say what you think it says. Because he was the conservative prime minister at, like, I don't know, the birth of scientific racism.
Yep.
So, anyway, but I think this gets to a decadence model that Marxists often miss. All right. One of the things I get frustrated with, yes, Virginia, I do believe in a decline in racist profits, but two, bureaucratic overreach and elite overproduction are real. Marxists don't really deal with them because they're not between classes, they're within classes. Eliteness is actually often an intra-class stratum as much as an inter-class stratum. That's what labor aristocracy is about. It's not that labor aristocrats aren't workers.
Right.
Like, I mean, classically speaking, they're just people who benefit from either leadership in the labor movement or imperialism. I mean, Engels uses it both ways. And it's not that, unlike later theories of third worldism that not even all third worldists believe in, but was very popular about 15 years ago, it's not even that labor aristocrats aren't exploited. They just have an advantage over workers and have an incentive to act in the interests as if they were petite bourgeoisie, actually. Most of the time. Although we miss the division in the petite bourgeoisie, like the professional bourgeoisie, petite bourgeoisie, and its associated class strata in the working class, and the petit bourgeois are at odds with each other all the time because one needs state patronage and the other is hurt by it. Like, but again, why does decadence matter for this? Because it leads to the overproduction of these highly complicated systems that sap off of other forms of production. It leads to what libertarians call cost disease. Like, how much does it cost to educate a kid today with less outcomes for it than it did even 30 years ago? So I can give you some numbers on that. This is something I actually know. And so I'm using this example. The average cost of educating a child has almost tripled in 30 years. 93% of all a percentage of all things spent on the dollar is spent on labor in education because it's a high labor field, even though it doesn't seem like it is because it's white collar labor, but it's a high labor field. It takes a lot of people devoted full time to doing things to do it. It is not profitable. You can actually see why there's never been really profitable for-profit education firms because it's so high labor. It's just the way it is. So then, okay, well then why is it double? Because teachers make less than they did in real terms, even after all the raises they got in the teens, in most states than they did 30 years ago, like in actual purchasing power, right? So where did all this go? It went into an administrative bloat. But people go, oh, bullshit jobs. It was just bullshit jobs. Wrong. The administrative bloat exists to deal with increasing documentation needs and regulation needs, and also to deal with being sued. Because this administrative bloat is the worst in the U.S. because we handle everything, not even violations of regulations, not by criminal court, but by civil lawsuit for the most part. But also, you see this everywhere. You don't just see it here. You see it in the UK. You see it in France. All right. So what's happening? Well, this one institution is not profitable and intersects with other institutions that have growing needs of regulation and also growing needs of production, and it increases the cost of everything you need. I'll give you an example of that. To be legally compliant, to do any kind of education research, a school board now needs to have its own committee that acts as an IRB. It needs to have a bunch of lawyers on staff. It needs to have people to ensure compliance paperwork is done. It needs to have more and more people to comply with federal mandates. It needs to have people to enforce censorship rules imposed by Republicans. All these things are a cost of labor. So now it costs double or triple what it, depending on the state. That's why I'm using vague terms here. What it used to cost to educate people. There's also all this rent seeking in forms of technology, but that's actually not what's driving the cost increase.
No, that's attendant to the cost increase.
Right. And then you go, well, how do we simplify this? You have to blow up the system and start from scratch. There is no way to reform that system without reforming the entire society around it, because it's responding to that society. That is this is what we call the over complexity problem in institutions. And people are like, oh, that's a metaphor. It's not a metaphor. It's literal. And it literally eats up calories of people to reproduce themselves to do. It's something you have to control for. I actually think this is part of why dealing with apparatchiks and middle party officials is such a problem for communists, and has been in every communist society that's ever existed, because this tendency is not just a capitalist tendency, but you combine that with capitalism and you're going to accelerate the problems really quickly. That leads to 3, the overproduction of elites are actually, this should be restated because that's not true. It's not just that elites are overproductive. It makes it sound like it's all fail sons.
Although it is all fail sons, but that's not why.
Like the fact you and I have I don't know what your class background is, but my class background is blue collar. The fact that I have a degree actually does indicate that the overproduction of elites does reach down into other classes. It does not right now, but it did in the 80s and 90s.
No, right. No, you are right. It's when I say it's all fail sons, it's just because I think that's funny, but it's not actually literally.
It's not all fail sons. Yeah. But the number of fail sons leads to 4 elite capture and deliberate inefficiency, which leads to deskilling of elites, not just the common people. Now we throw back in some economic stuff that Marxists do know about. The centralization of production does something that Marx didn't actually predict, but actually is logical in some of the logic of capital. It's the centralization of production through automation because of the need to lower socially necessary labor time. And why do you want to lower socially necessary labor time? It reduces costs, which temporarily jukes your profits. The problem with that, though, is that the temporary jukes and profits also enable more people to enter the market, which drives prices down, which drives profitability down, which there's only 2 ways to fix. Yes, monopsony power or common immiseration. We're getting both, but I was
gonna say, why not both?
Right. We're getting both, but the fact that, for example, 50%, I said 90% on something recently, I was wrong. 50% of most consumer spending plus 2024 is actually of the top 10% of households. And if you even look at that, it's even more disparaged than that. It's like most of consumer spending. And I'm not talking about economically productive spending, just consumer spending is like tied into basically people who have like, we live in the revenge of the Nepo baby trust fund people who literally are the only thing holding the economy up. The
and
consumer,
NVIDIA.
the consumer economy up. Plus, it's holding NVIDIA up because you have all this excess revenues to throw into asset investment. But here's the problem: we don't know what these assets would be worth if they were all be made to valorize now. This is what when people laugh at Marxists for fictitious capital. This is what Marxists mean.
Yeah, fictitious capital actually means. It doesn't mean counterfeit.
It doesn't mean counterfeit money. It means valuation is not equal to actual value if you had to sell the thing, but you don't know that until you sell it. You can't see
right, like how
the moment of valuation.
It's like when you have like companies like Uber. How long did it take them to actually turn a profit? And yet
10 years, I think. They were before they finally started turning a profit.
Yeah, and yet
they definitely have not made their investors any of their money back yet.
That's true.
Yeah.
But they were valued enormously. So you could buy stock and you could speculate and you could trade it, and
we see that with ChatGPT, which is transparently unable to turn a profit by a lot.
It's like 80% of the entire economy now, or not the entire economy, but
no, NVIDIA, the physical production core of it is 80% of the entire economy.
Yeah.
But ChatGPT seems to be like the most valued form of stock. This is fictitious capital because it's based off of potential earnings that people are learning aren't going to come, which is why we have a more and more bubbly economy. And these bubbles get bigger and bigger, by the way, like because also there's no traditional investment isn't profitable at a rate that can outstrip inflation, even low levels of inflation. If you're only making 1 or 2%, then that's a problem. So what do? And so
you just stop printing out the jobs report.
That's that's that. But the other thing you do is you start chasing quick things that seem like investments, but are just like assets that it can inflate and deflate rapidly, like Bitcoin or whatever. So as people go, well, how that's related to this other problem? Okay, well, it is because one, you now have a de-skilled proletariat in the sense that they are skilled for jobs that they no longer are needed for. It is going to take about a generation to reskill them. So add that to elite overproduction, and you have a socially destabilizing problem. This is why you get all these you get people who talk like people imagine that the average MAGA lunatic is some like blue collar chud, but like some of the worst ones have law degrees from Cornell.
Oh yeah.
They're fuck ups but they got the degree and they have elite backgrounds.
It's like the people that were in the SS. they're all lawyers and PhDs.
Right. And people go, oh, it must be like, I'm like, no, this is not, your chuds are not like blue collar mechanics. I mean, they might be like, some of those people might be down on that intellectually for any number of reasons, but that's not where they come from. They're overproduced elites. And then people will say stuff like, well, the overproduce, and Freddie Du Bois says this about social justice, and Fume Otaiwo says this about identity politics. Although with identity politics, I think it's a little bit of a stretch, and we can get to why, but it's not really a bizarre thing today. You have another problem is elite capture. I think you see this in the left and left populism too, and even in workers' politics. Which means you have people speaking for the experience of being a worker who frankly don't know what the fuck they're talking about and are alienating workers by doing it.
Yeah.
Which means now in 3 different ways, it's harder to have a coherent working class response. It's harder to unionize because we no longer have large industrial shops. Like I support Starbucks unions as much as everyone, but they don't mean the same things as GM. unionizing.
Right.
It just frankly doesn't.
Just
that's technically the point of production, but only at the point of production of lattes.
Right. So this is not me shitting on the baristas. I think what they're doing is fine, but also shop sizes of 16 are not shop sizes of 7,000.
Yeah.
Which means they don't scale up in the same way. Those unions are going to have a harder time providing the benefits of the traditional unions in terms of negotiating contracts, in terms of providing other benefits. Now, still a lot of workers there, but but what about the traditional unions? We always talk about Sean Fain in the UAW, and not you and I, but socialist world. Bhaskar Sankara was actually suggesting he should be president, and I was like, no, he should run the fucking union. But two, why is the UAW still trying to get people as TAs? Because the American car industry only survives by keeping what would really be socially beneficial to Americans, which is cheap electric vehicles from China and supporting equipment or hybrid vehicles or whatever into the market to drop the price of artificially inflated American cars. Now, I know I sound like a neoliberal when I say that, but the reason why that is the case is it is very costly because of the value of the US dollar and because of the supply chains to continue just production here. Now, if I was UAW,
what you're doing is you're talking about the consequences of the neoliberal structure of the world. And so you're talking about like, this is what we should do, what needs to be in order for whatever. You're not saying this way. How do I put this? You're just acknowledging the reality. You're not talking. It's not a prescription. It's just, this is how it is.
Well, I said this the other day about food. This will surprise people. I'm like, the more you actually have to pay the full price of food, the more people will starve. Food is a labor-intensive industry. If you pay people living wage in agriculture, it's going to be a problem. That's why every culture on the planet subsidizes their food production.
Right.
Going all the way back to the ancient world.
Right. I mean, this is a pre-capitalist problem.
This is the reason why public-private partnerships are only half good. It's only the public half.
Right. Well, I mean, public-private partnerships to me are the worst of both worlds. I mean, because you have everything that capitalists would describe as a moral hazard, and none of the efficiency benefits of actually working directly through the state. And if you don't believe me, look at the Trump administration. Holy shit.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
So
it's funny because despite being heralded as the end of neoliberalism,
they're neoliberalism in one country, which is an impossibility. But go ahead.
Yeah. No, that's exactly right.
Dude, that's awesome.
Yep. So we are looking at a bunch of deep problems that are not structurally easy to fix. And that's decadence. Now, I guess this brings me to the last 30 minutes, and I've been talking a lot. I'll let you guys talk here. But why I think we shouldn't scoff at the moral elements of decadence, even if we're not Catholics or believe in like traditional moral values. I don't even know what the fuck that means, but you guys get what I'm saying. Like, I don't care about people if they're monogamous or polyamorous. I don't care about a bunch of these issues on a deeply moral level. I'm a moral thinker. I don't think these things are super moral questions, but I'm gonna actually complicate that. What I do think decadence still matters. All right. Read the way people talk about relationships, not just family. I know we're all supposed to be about family abolition, although, as I pointed out, that meant something entirely different in the 19th century than it does today. And also, when done to oppressed communities, was really bad, because it was. But there's a kind of contradiction in capitalism that people don't want to look at. They only want to look at one side or the other. Branko Milovic, I can't remember. It's not Michevich. That's the Jacobin guy, who says that on one hand, capitalism is deliberately destroying one of the few institutions that is a source of most people's socialization, which is the family, meaning people open to full commodification, including over their sex lives. On the other hand, it is actually true that Melinda Cooper and co. say that capitalism is dependent on the family as a way to bypass social goods for a long time and over relying on the family to do that, because it is still a relatively socially alienated form that is easy to control and breaks down other forms of social solidarity. Both things can be true, and that seems to bother people. Like, they don't seem to have a way to reconcile
that's the case. Whenever both things of whatever the things might be, when both things can be true, that bothers people.
Yeah, they don't like it.
But
that's my main shit, you know.
Yeah,
I'm of two minds.
True.
Yeah, I'm of two minds about this. What is this? Yes,
everything.
Yeah,
right.
What is this? Yes.
Like, I am a big supporter of, like, well, I'll tell you, it's like, I am a big believer in chosen family, but I also say part of the definition of family is you can't always get out of it.
Right. I think
like,
if you value social cohesion, setting aside some of the other arguments I might make, considering where I'm coming from, because I am very Catholic, but forget all that. If you value social cohesion, you have to acknowledge that there's something in the breakdown of social values and social responsibilities and social obligations that is directly detrimental to what you value most, which is social cohesion. Without some fealty to the past, which is tradition, without some fealty to your your family and thus and your neighborhood and so on,
community, family, etc.
Yeah,
everything else is going to break down too. So people drive really awfully in LA and in Atlanta, and it's not just because they just happen to.
They also drive really awfully in Utah, weirdly. But, go ahead. My point though is to tie this to defend your point and actually make it a little bit clearer. My point is not that we need all these traditional family modes forever. I'm not like some Freudian, or I don't necessarily think that the Catholic mode of society should be enforced on people, but I do think that obligation is really fucking important.
Yes.
Yeah.
And if you don't trust people enough, this is where the breakdown comes. So I've talked about a lot about the crisis of male loneliness, and people think I'm only looking at it from the man's point of view. And I'm like, no, there's a crisis of female loneliness and a female lack of trust too, because yes, they're dealing with man children who have been poorly served by their communities and alienated for a long time with no social roles, not even new social roles, just none.
Yeah.
The
crisis of male loneliness is everyone's problem.
Right. And also, interestingly, and I'm not saying this to make an anti-feminist point. I'm actually saying it to make a feminist point, but it's one that cuts against what people think. During most of the 20th century, the people who were most aware of their roles were women. If you look at social roles and gender today amongst young people, the people who are aware of their roles are men. It does not mean that they're the same thing as the 1950s housewife. They're absolutely not. What it means is holding on to the social role is now something that is so precarious to them for a variety of reasons, most of which have not a goddamn thing to do with feminism, that they have to be aware of it. All right. And I think that's interestingly under-discussed. All right. Because we have valorized certain forms of social mobility, but then they've also been feminized. Higher ed. And again, people are like, oh, you're saying feminized, you're like those chuds. No, but it's just objectively true that women have done better in school for whatever reasons. I tend to think of socialization to be more pro-social and more obligation driven. I also think there might be some stuff about zones of development that may be a little bit biological, but nonetheless, that I also think we've completely failed on And I don't think it's just hurting the men at all. All right.
I don't think it's possible to just hurt the men or just hurt the women. It's like,
and people think, oh, this is an American internet phenomenon. Go look at South Korea. I was there when this was beginning to develop in South Korea. It's more acute there than here.
Yeah.
And it, like, if it continues, the social reproduction of Korea will cease to exist.
Right. In Japan, it's the same thing.
Right.
Yeah.
And like, so like in the United States too, it's at the heart of stochastic violence, right? Mm-hmm. Is this male loneliness epidemic. And the way that leftists tend to treat it is like, well, maybe they should like, stop being such incel chuds. Like, yeah, okay, cool. Good. That's helpful.
Yeah, it's like, very similar to like, oh, look at the homelessness crisis and the drug addiction crisis. They should just stop. It's like, sure, maybe they should just stop, but in terms of like what's actually going to help, are you interested in that at all?
So my last point about this period of decadence, and then I'll do a recap and I'll let you guys respond and have your last points, right? Is that the last thing that you see, I think that's a sign of decadence, is that no one can look at the whole picture or acknowledge the complicatedness of the picture. That's why conspiracy theories are usually rooted in something true, but they go in a very false direction that makes you dependent on someone who knows about as much as you do. Like the conspiracy guru is usually just someone taking advantage of you, frankly.
Usually it's just somebody has enough time to figure out how to say how little they know.
Right. So you see this rife in decadent societies. Ironically, I point out Tucker Carlson knows this. He actually admitted, he actually talked about this in the case of Egypt's breakdown in the 1990s in a debate with Eric Alterman, which is why I don't think Tucker is as ignorant as people think he is. And also why I think Tucker is...
I think he's quite
also
savvy.
Able to make,
exactly what he's doing.
He makes good points a lot of the time because sometimes
unfortunately.
Sometimes your evil enemies are actually the people who are most acute at dealing with things. And Tucker is still socially minded in some way.
Yeah.
Like even if it's only for reactionary chud weirdo quasi-heretical form of Catholicism, he does actually believe in social reproduction.
He's an Episcopalian, by the way.
Oh, excuse me.
Yeah.
So he's doubly heretical.
Yeah.
Triply heretical, because Episcopalian's religion is just liberalism. No, oops, I should have said that out loud. All right. But anyway.
That's how you know we're nearing the end of, we're needing to wrap up. We're like, oh no, I said that.
Getting too honest, and just also my bigotry against Protestants really comes out. But I think this gives us, for the left, this relates to a hard problem, because the other thing I'm going to bring in at the end, this leads to people wanting to find subjects elsewhere that I think are valid, like the third world or whatever. I think a lot of the third worldist analysis is actually at least 3/4 right. I've actually said this a lot.
I think it's partially right, but I think it hinges upon something which is very it's very flawed in that there's this notion of a permanent third world, which
that's just it. Actually, I think it freezes everything in the 1950s, and then the other issue with it is like, no, nobody on the planet's just going to let people come and kill them to get rid of the capitalist off of a sense of fairness or what the fuck ever. So your project is doomed if you're correct. Luckily, you're not.
Yeah, like if you were correct, that would make Red Dawn also correct.
Right.
Instead of just a kick-ass movie.
Yeah, I really do love the first Red Dawn, even though it's hardly reactionary propaganda.
I mean, I saw it when I was like 10 years old, and I thought it was the coolest thing I had ever seen.
I think it's where I got
Nicaragua one of the countries that invaded?
Yeah, Nicaragua, Cuba, North Korea, and the Soviet Union, I think.
Yeah. It actually kind of made me think Soviet aesthetics was cool too, even though I was totally on the side of the Eagle Scouts when I watched it in the 80s. But I was like,
supposed to be.
It's like, man, those Soviets, they dress well.
I like the camo that they wear in that. I've always wanted to have some of that camo.
Yeah, the camo is objectively better than ours. But anyway, my point is like, so that makes sense, right? But my point is like, no, you have to have some, like, if you're a third worldist who believes there's stuff for people to do to join up with them, I actually have no truck with you. Like, you're fine. But because I do think, like, yeah, the developing world's been primitively accumulated forever. It's constantly moving around and it's constantly getting fucked over in 1,000 different ways, and we can go through it. But what I see now is like people doubling down on that when the peripheralization of the core is happening, and I'm like, it's happening here now too, guys. Like the barrier that you thought existed with like labor aristocracy and all, it's gone, or it's going away.
I think that when people talk about being third worldist, and I'm not talking about Kevin in this case, but with other people who talk about this.
I'm not either, actually.
And then they also like talk about their heroes of people like Xi Jinping. It's like, you don't know anything about the world if you think that third worldism would include China.
Yeah, exactly. Not since the fucking 90s anyway.
Yeah. Right.
We had a friend once who said, I think I agree with the third worldists, but I don't know what to do about it. Right. And that's kind of how I see myself. It's like, yeah, I mean, you're right about a lot of what you say, but to carry the logic through to application would just be inconceivable to me, you know?
Yeah. It seems to me that like this is why I had an issue with Samir Amin's thing. It's like, okay, so what do you want people to do? Do you want us to join up with the workers in the developing world and help them? Or do you want us to just like get out the way? In which case, the latter, it will only happen if it would possibly benefit us. And you're not saying it will. So what do you think is going to happen? And this gets more absurd on certain things. Like, I believe that settler colonialism is a valid way of understanding what happened in the Americas, all of the Americas, not just the Anglo ones. But are you going to undo it?
Right.
Like,
yeah, that's the problem. Yeah.
Like, are you going to propose a version of Landback that's possible? Are you going to pretend that 2% of the population is going to be able to get rid of 40 to 90% of the population? Like,
yeah, so like there are multiple versions of Landback, and like,
some of them I actually like. Some of them I want to be clear on that.
Right. I mean, I've got a sort of anarcho-Maoist friend who says that the United States is an illegitimate state, and you know all descendants of colonists need to go back to their countries of origin. Like the fucking straw man that I make fun of is like what he and the group that he's part of, which I don't even know what it is, actually believe in. And of course, that is sort of the maximalist position that a lot of people do take, even though they don't actually have any kind of, you know,
where would I go back to?
Yeah. Which like, part of me goes back to where, right?
Like,
yeah. Chop me in half, send half of me to the Czech Republic and the other half of me to places in Northern Europe.
But it also gets like, when do we start this too? Because it just seems arbitrary that we started at 1492 or 1619 or 1620 or but also it's weirdly blood and soil.
Yes, very, very much so it is.
Yeah. It's not even like on the sly. It's just
right.
It's just the good version of blood and soil.
Yeah, it's woke race science.
Yeah.
But I do think there are versions of Landback I completely would agree with, like, as like fully empowering indigenous peoples of the land they currently occupy. And no, they can't kick everybody out, but you know, they have their own political structures. Giving them,
you can expropriate like large landholders to give indigenous people enough of their land back for them to live on profitable pieces of land.
Right.
Or if you look at a map of the United States and you look at and that map includes where all the reservations are, and you talk about what statehood would mean, you talk about turning the Bureau of Indian Affairs into a representative body in the same way that Venezuela has the indigenous parliament. There are ways to do this.
Yeah,
but these are ways which rely upon a constitutional republic and a nation state.
plural nationalism, which people go, oh, that's so weird. Really, China did it before it was even communist. That's Sun Yat-sen's project. Like,
look at European Union.
Yeah. Well, not that that's really working, but yes.
No, it's not. But there is a way that the European Union could work, just not in like the neoliberal framework that it was conceived.
Right. So when people say
the United States of Europe has been like the slogan for like revolutionary thinking people since well before Marx was born.
Right. So my point about this is just to say very clearly that these categories are also symptoms of decadence. So if you think you got an easy answer, you kind of don't.
Yeah.
And the reason why they're symptoms of decadence is you're encouraged in a capitalist attention economy to take maximalist positions that are absurd if you think about them for 35 seconds, but they get attention. And we'd like to pretend that's this social media, but I don't think that's true anymore. I think that is like near universal.
Yeah.
So to recap how all this is related, because this is all over the place, but one, and we are going to go back to these essays, guys. We're also going to talk about some conservative stuff that we find some actual valid complaints and discussions in.
Honestly, the conservative stuff that we've read so far, I found more value in than most of the leftist stuff we've read so far.
Yeah, like seriously, when it comes to if it bothers anyone that we read and talk about conservative material or thinkers, that means just do better, left.
Right. Yeah. But to add this all together, I think one, you do have the basic Marxist dynamics of profit rates. You also have the deskilling of the classes, plural, not just one of them. Part of that is due to elite overproduction and elite capture. Another part of that is due to the overcomplication of society in general. That is a pre-capitalist phenomenon and probably will be a post-capitalist phenomenon. It's something we're going to have to deal with forever. You have the consequences of deskilling, meaning there's less clear, coherent subjects, which leads to nihilism and lack of social obligation in the general population, which looks like immorality. It is immorality in my point, but I mean that in a general sense. Like, even if you're a moral pluralist, it's hard to be a moral pluralist when no one has obligation to hold morality together. Morality is fucking social. Which does not lead to just like immorality. It leads to further commodification of things that I think should not be particularly commodified, such as social reproduction, aka sex. But social reproduction is a lot more than sex. It's aesthetics. It's a lot of stuff.
I would call the commodification of these things immoral.
Right. Yeah. And why would it be?
I would call them anti-human.
Right. Yeah. Why would it be immoral and anti-human without even having to appeal to one of the various religions? Let's tell you why in a very simple framework. It pits people against themselves in ways that make them stupider. So you said deskilling, including in literacy, which we didn't even get into, but I could have. It makes things more expensive because competition increases the waste of resources in order to get them. If you don't believe me, why did the Europeans in Renaissance, I got this from Ada Palmer actually, spend so much extravagant amounts of money on tech, but also on stupid Roman bullshit that the Ottomans and the Chinese and other people at the same time period did not do. And it wasn't just about scientific innovation. It was about internal competition amongst fragmented powers in Europe, which was only settled by imperialism, flat out. So people who think I'm unfair to Samir Amin, there is a little bit of truth in what he's saying. So you see this all the time. Like, I think the harder things for socialists is a lot of socialists want to believe that these problems are just capitalism, and some of them are. About half the ones I've mentioned are only capitalist problems.
Right.
But some of them are not. And that, I think that bugs people, because I think one of the biggest ways we've sold socialism short is making it big rock candy mountain bullshit where there's no problems after we just get rid of the capital.
Yes.
Like, because that's not gonna fucking happen. Like,
The way I've always thought of it, I think it's much more helpful is to think about it not so much in terms of like one solution revolution, rather that the concept of socialism is about getting to start finding solutions.
Right.
That's it.
Yeah.
Which we can't do right now because we're all geared towards profitability, and we're not even geared towards that anymore. We're geared to like basically, I mean, I think we're in cannibal capitalism, really. That's what I would call this.
And I think that the war of all against all is one in which we're all going to lose, because even Elon Musk needs a friend, like a human friend, not like a AI friend.
Yeah, I'm with you. And also, dear God, socialists, please don't be using ChatGPT to make up for your lack of friends. If that's the case, we're totally fucked.
God.
Like that's a species-ending event. Maybe that is the answer to Fermi's paradox. Is not that the AI kills us, is the AI makes us not socially reproduce. Like
it just kills us slowly.
Yeah. But it doesn't kill us, we kill us.
Right.
But not even in war. Like
species being is a really important concept to Marxists.
Yeah.
And that we should go return to it. And also being species. That also matters. You have to exist.
Yeah. I mean, social reproduction actually does have to happen, guys, because and that does involve actual reproduction. Like
it's a huge component of it, actually.
Like
that's something that Marxists,
but
a lot of Marxists refuse to grapple with that, with the idea that human beings need to reproduce, and social reproduction is actually it's actually a net good, right?
Yeah.
That's when you have conversations with leftists, they generally poo-poo that, like the idea that there's a massive population decline all over the world and that that's actually a problem. That's right-wing talking points. That's bullshit. It's not something we actually need to worry about. I'm like, I think it is, because it's not that I think that human beings are going to die out, which they might, but I don't think that that's going to happen. But I do think that it indicates that there is a deep, deep social illness that affects every society in the world.
Yeah.
And that social illness is something that is horrible. And will have redound to the benefit of the worst people and the class, deepen class entrenchments and expand the powers of the worst people in the world to the point where it makes what we want to do far less possible than it is right now, which is almost completely impossible.
Yeah.
Yep. And on that note, we're gonna end. All right.
On that happy note,
we'll be back. We'll be talking about the Aufheben essay. I think we're only going to devote one more. We won't go through it quite as thoroughly because I found it useful for the history. I think even its authors don't agree with its conclusion, and also it gets a little bit repetitive, even though
it's tedious towards the end. Really is.
Like in ways that even like the Samir Amin one wasn't. Even though I thought the Samir Amin was like, give me the book so if I know if you're full of shit or not. Oh, you died. Damn it.
Yeah.
It sucks.
Because I feel like commenting on the introduction to a book that was never written is kind of an accidental dick move. But,
yeah.
Because
I don't know. That's like all grad seminars.
Fair. That's actually
it's just commenting on the people only read the introduction and they just have like hour-long discussions about it.
Oh my god. I also think theory Twitter is like I read the summary of the introduction in the grad seminar, and then people wonder why a sign of decadence. I have to read whole fucking text on my channel just to make sure you guys actually got all of it before you try to correct me about something. Like
we've actually picked up the Varn model of close reading stuff recently, and I actually really enjoy it as a method of podcasting.
It's easy to podcast, and B, you're actually teaching people stuff, and they can argue with you because you provide them all the evidence there. Like,
it's not always appropriate, but it's much more often than I I think we once recognized.
No, I tried to do a Raymond Goisberg a book, How Not to Be a Liberal That Way. It actually didn't work because it's intermixed with like autobiography and stuff about the Catholic Church, and all of which is very interesting, but actually isn't as useful for going through that way. But nonetheless, I think for a lot of these theory articles, it's vital. And on that note, we really are done. Subscribe to Regrettable Century. You can find them on Patreon. They have a free show. There are 4 hosts now.
Yeah.
Yes. 4 hosts. We do 2 public episodes a month and 2 Patreon episodes a month. Oh, and we do the weekly geopolitics roundup every week,
which is also Patreon
every week on Patreon. Yeah.
On that note, we're done. Bye. Like and subscribe at Varn Blog on Patreon, or you can find me on any podcast server on the free show, or you can find me on YouTube. The Zoomers like the YouTube. I don't get it. I really don't. But
yeah, we're on there too, I guess.
I feel like they're watching a Zoom call, but with better backgrounds. But that's it. That's all I can promise you.
Yeah.
All right. And on that note, we're gonna stop, and I'll answer your question after.